They say revenge hits best when it's calm, but sometimes it's better served under floodlights, with diesel engines humming in the dark. So, imagine this. You're half asleep, it's around 3 a.m., and the air smells like hot asphalt and burning rubber. I walk outside, thinking maybe a utility truck broke down on the road. Instead, I find a crew of strangers paving over my private gravel driveway, the one I paid extra for to keep out of HOA control. My fence posts? Gone. My property markers smashed into the dirt. And sitting right on my hood is a fresh envelope from the HOA. Inside, a letter so smug it might as well have been perfumed. They'd paved my road for community standards and expected me to pay a $3,000 improvement fee plus monthly dues. That was the night I realized the people running this neighborhood weren't just power-hungry, they were organized. What they didn't know was that I'd spent 20 years in commercial development. I know how these games work, and I had friends in every corner of the county, including every tow yard within 50 miles. By sunrise, every car parked in front of their fancy clubhouse had mysteriously disappeared. 6 tow trucks, 1 long night, and a little bit of poetic justice. But that was just the beginning. Before I get too far, let me tell you how it started. My name's Garrett Rockwell. 3 years ago, I thought I'd found heaven. I'd just sold my concrete business in Dallas, ready to slow life down a bit. My wife Elena and I found this quiet 3-acre property at the edge of the Willow Creek subdivision. Beautiful rolling land, a gravel road leading up to the house, and no HOA strings attached. I even paid extra, $80,000, to keep that driveway deeded privately. No shared maintenance, no rules about mailbox color, no board telling me how tall my grass could be. Just peace, family, and a whole lot of Texas sky. Elena's a high school principal, sharp as a tack, heart of gold. And our daughter Sophia was 15 then. Smart kid, keeps to herself, works hard, never asks for much. We'd moved out here to breathe, to live quiet, and for a while, it was perfect. Mornings smelled like fresh coffee and wildflowers. Evenings were filled with crickets and the sound of tires crunching on gravel. My favorite sound in the world. Until she showed up. Vivian Ashcroft, the HOA president. A woman who could make a parking ticket feel like a federal crime. She drove a pearl-white BMW with a plate that said PRPT Queen. And if you think that sounds pretentious, trust me. She lived up to it. She'd been running the HOA for 3 years, collecting lawsuits like trophies, grass height violations, mailbox infractions, even someone's Christmas lights being too reflective. The kind of person who measures lawn height with a ruler and enjoys it. I tried to stay out of her way. But Vivian had this obsession with uniformity. To her, anything unique, anything private, was a threat to order. And my quiet little gravel driveway? That was the first thing she wanted to fix. It was a Tuesday morning in March when peace packed its bags and left. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the rumble started. Deep, steady, mechanical. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in your front yard. I stepped outside, mug in hand, and froze. A crew of workers in orange vests were spreading fresh asphalt right over my gravel driveway. The air was thick with tar and diesel. Fence posts I'd installed myself were piled like firewood on the side. I yelled to the foreman, "What do you think you're doing on private property?" He blinked like I'd just interrupted his lunch break. "Got a work order, sir," he said, waving a clipboard. It had a neat little signature at the bottom. Vivian Ashcroft. Project title, Community Access Improvement. That was the moment my stomach turned cold. They'd paved right over my property line, and at the entrance stood 2 giant stone pillars with shiny brass plaques. Willow Creek Estates, Grand Entrance, Est 2023. My own driveway had been branded as a community monument. By the time I reached the end of the road, my boots were coated in fresh asphalt. I didn't even change shoes before storming into the HOA office, a tiny space in a strip mall that smelled like air freshener and cheap ambition. Vivian sat behind her desk like royalty holding court. Pearl necklace, designer suit, fake smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Mr. Rockwell," she said sweetly, "we're just bringing your rustic access up to neighborhood standards." She said rustic, like it was a contagious disease. I pointed at the map, spread across her desk. My road, highlighted in yellow and labeled Future Community. "Thoroughfare. That's private land," I said. "Deeded. Paid for. Mine." Vivian didn't blink. "The previous owner verbally agreed to share access," she said, tapping her pen against the map. "We're just formalizing what's already been used by the community." Of course, there was no paperwork, just her word. And the man she claimed agreed? Dead for 5 years. When I got home, there was a letter waiting. Certified mail, HOA letterhead. It was so official-looking it could have come from the IRS. Assessment notice, $3,200 for road improvements, $85 monthly community maintenance fee, 30 days to install compliant landscaping. Failure to comply may result in fines, liens, or legal action. That was the moment Elena snapped. She slammed cabinet doors so hard the dishes rattled. "They're not touching our land," she said, eyes blazing. Sophia just stared out the window, watching neighborhood. Kids skate down our brand-new community road. The sound of wheels grinding on fresh asphalt echoed through the morning air. I stood there, reading that letter again, and realized something. Vivian wasn't just pushing for power. She was testing how far she could go. What she didn't know? The man who built this road before me, old rancher named George Blackwell, had written something into the deed that would make her whole scheme crumble. And I was about to dig it up. You'd think after being caught paving someone's land, she'd back off, but Vivian didn't know how to stop. Within a week, she had those stone pillars polished like they belonged in a luxury resort. Shiny brass letters glinting in the Texas sun. Willow Creek Estates, grand entrance. Every time I drove past, it felt like I was trespassing on my own property. And just when I thought it couldn't get more ridiculous, she hired a security company. Tuesday morning. I'm heading into town for supplies when this guy in a neon vest and golf cart waves me down at the end of my driveway. Clipboard in hand, face all business. "Excuse me, sir," he says. "I need to verify your authorization to use this community access road." I blinked at him, waiting for the punchline. "My authorization?" I said. "Buddy, that's my house right there." He shrugged like it didn't matter. "Ma'am says all vehicles need clearance. Community safety." The man actually called her ma'am. I wanted to laugh, but the anger hit first, deep in my chest, cold and steady. I'd seen this move before, back when I worked in construction. You create a security zone, make it look official, and suddenly people start doubting their own property lines. That's not safety. That's intimidation. So I filed a formal complaint with the county the next morning. Years in construction teach you one thing. Nothing gets built legally without permits. Not a sidewalk, not a driveway, not even those stupid stone pillars. 2 days later, the county inspector called. "Mr. Rockwell," he said, "there's no record of any roadwork permit for your address or the surrounding parcels." Music to my ears. By the next afternoon, a bright orange stop work order was stapled right onto her fancy entrance pillars. I swear, it was the most beautiful color I'd seen in months. Vivian's reaction? Pure theater. Friday night, she held an emergency HOA meeting. Of course, I wasn't invited, but my neighbor Marcus, a retired Marine who walks his dog past the clubhouse, overheard everything. Apparently, Vivian spent an hour ranting about me, said I was undermining community progress and threatening property values. The board voted to fine me $500 a day for failure to maintain common property. On my land. The next morning, I received another certified letter, this time declaring me persona non grata in my own neighborhood. Even the mail clerk looked embarrassed handing it over. Elena was furious. I could hear her slamming drawers from the kitchen. "They're gaslighting you," she said, "trying to make you feel like the criminal." She wasn't wrong, and that's when the real war began. Vivian didn't just want my driveway, She wanted to make an example out of me. So she launched what she called a community awareness campaign. Translation: organized gossip. Suddenly, neighbors who used to wave were crossing the street instead. Elena came home one afternoon pale and quiet. "3 people stopped me at the store," she said. "They said your lawsuit could hurt property values." The smell of lavender from her hair barely covered the stress. That's when I knew Vivian was playing long-term psychological warfare. But I had something she didn't: experience and patience. And while she was busy painting me as the villain, I was building my case, quietly, methodically, and legally. While Vivian was busy spreading rumors, I was busy making phone calls. Old habits die hard. And my years in construction had taught me something important. Corruption leaves fingerprints. You just have to know where to look. First call was to Dustin Chavez, an old partner of mine who now worked as a traffic engineering consultant. I told him what was happening. He didn't even hesitate. "Send me your property documents," he said. "We'll do a fresh land survey, GPS accurate. Let's get the truth on paper." It cost me $3,200. The exact same amount Vivian tried to charge me for road improvements. Poetic justice. Next, I called Rex Donovan, a retired sheriff's deputy who'd gone into private investigations. Rex has this way of finding things people would rather stay buried. 3 days later, he called me back. Voice low, almost amused. "You're gonna want to sit down for this one," he said. Turns out, Vivian wasn't just power-hungry, she was invested. Literally. For the past 18 months, she'd been buying up lots around my property under different company names. 6 of them, to be exact, all tied back to her through shell corporations. She wasn't improving the community. She was assembling land, mine being the missing piece in her $1 million puzzle. That's when it clicked. Back in my developer days, we called it assemblage. Buy several small parcels cheap, combine them into one, and flip it as a premium estate development. But if one property owner refuses to sell, the entire plan collapses, and that's exactly what I was. The holdout. The problem she couldn't fix with fines or fake letters. The next move came fast. A letter from her attorney, Peaton and Associates, claiming my new survey markers damaged community property. They threatened a $50,000 lawsuit and attorney fees unless I removed them immediately. They were suing me for marking my own land. Elena found me that night in the garage, surrounded by blueprints and deed records, sorting everything into folders. She leaned against the door frame, arms crossed. "You look like you're planning a battle," she said. I smiled. "Funny you say that," I told her. "Because that's exactly what this is." Vivian must have realized the legal threats weren't working, because her next move wasn't about courtrooms. It was about control. It started small. Groups of neighbors began walking past our house every morning. Same time, same route. Phones out, snapping pictures. Elena called it the parade. I called it what it was: surveillance. They'd stroll by slowly, pretending to admire the landscaping, but you could see it. The little whispers, the way their cameras lingered on our security signs, the way they laughed quietly when they thought we weren't watching, and leading the pack, clipboard in hand. Vivian herself. Every day she'd march up and down that road like she was inspecting a crime scene, writing notes, taking photos. One time I heard her tell someone, "We have to document safety concerns." Safety concerns. On my property. It didn't stop there. By afternoon, the photos started showing up on social media. Posts with captions like "Some people don't care about neighborhood standards," or "Wonder if this landscaping meets code." Hundreds of comments followed, neighbors debating whether we were the problem. Elena tried to ignore it, but I could see the toll. She'd stay quiet at dinner, scrolling her phone, eyes getting glassy. Sophia started keeping her curtains closed during the day. "It's like living in a fish tank," she said. "Everyone's watching us." And she wasn't. Wrong. The smell of jasmine from Elena's porch garden, the one that used to mean peace, was now just a reminder that people were photographing it every day. Then came the paperwork nightmare. When I went to check our county survey record, it had vanished. The clerk, a young woman with a last name that matched Vivian's, claimed there was no file on record for our driveway access. She smiled while saying it, like it was a joke. "You'll just need to reapply for a permit," she said. "Processing takes about 6 months. Filing fee is $2,800. 6 months with my property in legal limbo." That's when it hit me. This wasn't incompetence. This was coordinated. Vivian wasn't just playing HOA politics. She was pulling strings inside the county office, and she was willing to break the law to make it look like I was the one in the wrong. But I'd seen this game before, and people who think they can rewrite the rules usually forget. Someone's always keeping receipts. Rex called one evening while I was out in the garage, sorting through piles of paperwork. His tone was calm, but I could hear the edge underneath. "Garrett," he said, "you're not just dealing with an HOA president. You're dealing with someone drowning in debt." Turns out, Vivian wasn't just buying properties through shell companies. She was borrowing against them. $2.4 million in development loans spread across 3 banks. Her collateral? Projected income from HOA fees. That's right. She'd promised the banks more dues-paying members than she actually had. And my land was the missing piece that would make her numbers add up. If I didn't sell, her whole financial tower would collapse. If I did, she'd walk away a millionaire. Rex found even more dirt. The construction company that had done her illegal roadwork, owned by her brother-in-law, County Commissioner Bradley Morse. He'd approved every fake permit she filed, even environmental ones that bypassed inspection entirely. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Those community improvements she bragged about, they were funded by loans in the HOA's name. Loans the homeowners didn't even know existed. She was building a real estate empire out of other people's dues and backroom deals, and the county was helping her do it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the folder of evidence Rex sent me. Printouts of loan documents, property deeds, screenshots of shell company listings. Each one was another brick in her house of cards. Elena poured me coffee and sat across from me, eyes tired but steady. "She's desperate," she said quietly. "That's why she's coming after us so hard." "Yeah," I said, flipping another page. "Because if I don't cave, she loses everything." Vivian had turned this neighborhood into her personal business venture, and I was the one man standing between her and financial ruin. She didn't just want my driveway, she needed it. And when people that greedy start running out of time, they don't get careful. They get dangerous. The first sign of sabotage came with the smell of burnt grass. It was a Thursday morning, one of those blistering Texas days where the air itself feels heavy. I stepped outside and saw long brown streaks cutting through our front lawn like scars. Our irrigation system had stopped working overnight. I crawled under the panel and found the line sliced clean. Not chewed, not torn. Cut. Whoever did it knew exactly where to hit. Before I could call a plumber, my phone rang. "Mr. Rockwell," came Vivian's syrupy voice, pretending concern. "We've received reports that you plan to damage community property. Any repairs will need board approval and a $5,000 security deposit." I had to laugh. "Community property?" I said. "You mean the land you destroyed?" Her tone sharpened instantly. "That attitude, Mr. Rockwell, is exactly why people are questioning whether you belong here." She hung up before I could answer. It was official. She'd moved from legal threats to psychological warfare. That same week, her attorney filed a court petition trying to block me from interfering with community maintenance, basically asking a judge to make me take down my private property signs. I'd seen this tactic before. It's called a slap suit, a legal weapon meant to bury you in court fees until you give up. But I wasn't alone anymore. Marcus, my retired Marine neighbor, offered to install motion cameras around the property. Dr. Hernandez, who lived 2 streets over, dropped off a folder filled with HOA irregularities she'd been quietly documenting for months. And Janet, a school teacher with color-coded binders for everything, told me Vivian had tried to buy her corner lot for half its value. When she refused, her trash pickup started getting missed. The pattern was clear. Vivian didn't just target me, she targeted anyone who wouldn't sell. Then came the tax hit. A letter from the county said our property value had increased due to road improvements, raising my taxes from $4,200 to $7,800 a year. The same improvements that I never asked for. That night, Elena and I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The once silent road was now busy with cars, teens skating past, and neighbors staring just a little too long. "She's getting desperate," Elena said quietly. "Good," I replied. "Desperate people make stupid mistakes." A week later, I got an invitation that looked almost official. Gold seal, letterhead, the whole 9 yards. It was for an informal mediation session at the county commissioner's office to discuss community concerns. Yeah, informal is code for trap. Still I went, because sometimes you have to walk straight into the lion's den just to see who's holding the leash. When I opened the door, I knew exactly what kind of meeting this was. 12 HOA board members sat around a polished table. Vivian stood at the head, all smiles and perfume, with a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. Her lawyer sat beside her, pretending to look impartial. Across from them, 3 county officials stared down at their notepads like hostages waiting for rescue. Vivian clicked her remote, and a PowerPoint started flashing across the screen. Slides labeled Community Impact Assessment and Future Development Proposal. Halfway through, she dropped the bomb. She wanted me to sell my private road easement, the one I paid $80,000 for, to the HOA for $15,000. $15,000. I actually laughed, loud enough that the guy next to me jumped. Vivian didn't even blink. "Mr. Rockwell," she said, "this offer is generous considering the legal complications you've caused." Her tone was the same, one she used in her HOA newsletters, the kind that drips fake concern. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I'll consider your offer, right after you consider mine. $0 and a public apology." Then I stood up, slid my chair in, and walked out. The silence behind me was priceless. The commissioner's assistant chased me into the hallway. "Sir, are you sure you want to leave?" she asked nervously. I smiled. "Trust me," I said. "This meeting isn't for me. It's for the cameras." And I was right. 2 days later, a headline hit the local paper. "Property dispute divides Willow Creek community." Vivian had clearly fed the story to the reporter. She painted herself as the hero, a caring leader trying to modernize the neighborhood, and me as the selfish homeowner blocking progress. My side of the story? 1 paragraph, buried next to an article about a lost cat. The picture they printed made it worse, an aerial shot of my house surrounded by development, like I was a stubborn rock in the middle of progress. Online comments exploded. People I'd never met were calling me greedy, arrogant, a troublemaker. But what they didn't know was that I had footage. Marcus's cameras had been rolling for weeks, catching everything. Crews trespassing, tearing out survey markers, dumping asphalt, even Vivian herself giving orders at 2 a.m. The time for playing defense was over. I was done reacting. Now, I was going on offense. They thought they'd cornered me. But what they didn't realize, I've spent half my life reading contracts and winning fights people never saw coming. The first rule of surviving a smear campaign? Don't yell louder. Build proof quieter. So that's what I did. Marcus's cameras had caught everything. Night footage of Vivian's crew trespassing, tearing out my markers, even that fake security guard harassing Sophia when she checked our mail. I organized the clips, time-stamped every single one, and backed them up 3 times. Then I called Catherine Silverman, one of the sharpest property rights attorneys in Dallas. She's the kind of woman who could make opposing counsel cry before the lunch break. She didn't even hesitate. "We'll hit them where they don't expect it. Insurance, permits, and environmental law," she said. Meanwhile, the attacks kept coming. Out of nowhere, my homeowner's insurance demanded an extra $4,000 a year for commercial liability exposure. Turns out, someone had filed an anonymous complaint claiming I was running an unsafe construction business from home. Vivian's fingerprints were all over it. Then Elena came home pale and shaking. Someone had gone to her school district, anonymously, of course, and accused her of being involved in her husband's hostile property dispute. I'd seen this tactic before in business wars. When you can't break a person, you go after their family. But that was her biggest mistake, because by turning it personal, she'd handed me the legal ammunition I needed. See, workplace intimidation and harassment tied to a property dispute? That's federal territory. Civil rights violations. She was building my case for me. Rex and I spent the next week digging deeper and found the smoking gun, a petition Vivian had filed with the City Planning Commission to reclassify my road as public property. If that passed, she could force me to sell through eminent domain for $1. The hearing was set for next month, but that was fine, because I wasn't showing up alone. Dr. Hernandez was compiling legal precedents proving my private ownership was ironclad. Marcus was assembling a full harassment timeline, dates, times, video evidence. And Janet? She was gathering financial records, showing where all that HOA money was really going. We were done playing her game. Now we were writing the rules. Rex called me on a Sunday afternoon. I could tell from his tone something big had dropped. "Garrett," he said, "you were right. She's running out of road." He'd spent the last week tracing financial records, and what he found could have been the script of a crime show. Vivian's shell companies weren't just paper fronts. They were drowning in debt. Over $300,000 owed to private lenders, maxed out credit cards, missed payments, and worse. Her real estate license was already under state review for conflict of interest. Every illegal permit she pushed through, signed off by her brother-in-law, Commissioner Morse. 17 approvals, all tied to her developments. It wasn't just shady, it was criminal. I sat there in silence while Rex listed the evidence. Every word made the puzzle clearer. Vivian wasn't fighting for power. She was fighting for survival. Without my property, her entire business plan collapsed, and the banks were already circling. That same week, Marcus told me something strange. He'd overheard an HOA member saying Vivian was planning a community beautification weekend. That sounded innocent enough, until I checked the event page. Photos of smiling families holding gardening tools, a banner reading "Restoring Property Standards Together." But I knew her too well by now. That wasn't a volunteer event. It was a cover for something. Meanwhile, smaller signs of her desperation were showing everywhere. Anonymous flyers on windshields claiming I operated an illegal business. False safety complaints sent to the fire marshal. Even a visit from Child Protective Services, all based on concerned neighbor reports. The inspector was polite, actually apologized on his way out. "We get these all the time," he said quietly. "Usually from someone trying to scare people." It didn't work. If anything, it made me angrier. Not the loud kind, but the focused kind. Vivian was burning through every trick she had left, and it was costing her. Rex's next update confirmed it. One of her banks had called in a loan early. She had 90 days to pay $2.4 million or lose everything. I could practically feel the panic rising in her neat little world. Elena noticed it too. "She's falling apart," she said one night, watching another patrol car roll past. "Good," I said, sliding another piece of evidence into the binder, "because the cracks are showing, and we're about to push." It started with a bang. Literally. One Friday night, I woke up to the sound of metal slamming against metal. By the time I got outside, my mailbox was in pieces. Torn off the post, the door bent like someone had used it for batting practice. At first I thought it was kids. Then I checked Marcus's cameras. 2 HOA board members. 3 in the morning, one swinging a baseball bat, the other laughing. They didn't even bother hiding their faces. By sunrise, I'd already emailed the footage to the sheriff, but that was just the warm-up. The next morning, I walked out to find orange paint splattered across my siding. Big, sloppy streaks that spelled out "move." My lawn looked like a crime scene, and when I checked the sprinklers, cut again. Someone had even dumped weed killer around Elena's rose bushes, leaving dead brown circles across the yard. The message was clear: leave or suffer. Vivian's campaign of fear had gone full throttle. Elena stayed strong, but I could see it in her eyes. She was exhausted. Sophia stopped inviting friends over. The few that did come by got teased at school for living next to the crazy guy. Then came the cherry on top: anonymous messages sent to Elena's work email, warning her to keep your husband under control before this gets worse. That night, she handed me her phone. "I'm not scared of her," she said, "but I am tired of living like this." I took her hand. "Then we end it," I told her, and I meant it, because while Vivian was busy setting fires, I'd been quietly preparing my counterstrike. Dr. Hernandez had gathered written statements from a dozen neighbors about her intimidation tactics. Marcus had hours of high-def footage showing her crew trespassing, cutting lines, and vandalizing property. And Rex had something even better: proof that every one of her fake permits traced back to her brother-in-law's office. Vivian didn't realize it yet, but she was standing on a powder keg, and we were holding the match. Saturday morning came with the sound of engines, pickup trucks, SUVs, even a few minivans, all lined up on the edge of my property. It looked like a parade at first glance, until I noticed the bolt cutters. Vivian had organized something she called Community Action Day. The flyer said it was about restoring neighborhood pride. In reality, it was a mob dressed in matching shirts, ready to tear down anything that reminded them I wouldn't bend. They carried sledgehammers, shovels, even chainsaws. I counted 20 people. Some were just neighbors too scared to say no, but a few, they looked ready for war. And there she was. Vivian stepped out of her white BMW like a general inspecting her troops. Clipboard in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, that fake smile plastered across her face. "Morning, neighbors," she called, voice bright and cheery. "Let's bring this corner of our community back up to proper standards." It was surreal, like watching a PTA meeting turn into a riot. Marcus stood beside me, phone in hand, recording everything. We'd already called the sheriff that morning just in case. Vivian strutted right up to the property line and pointed. "Start by removing those illegal signs," she ordered. That's when the first siren wailed in the distance. Deputy Rodriguez, the same one who'd been quietly monitoring our situation for weeks, pulled up with his lights flashing. He stepped out calm, hand resting on his radio. "Folks," he said, voice steady but firm, "you need to step back from the property line. You're trespassing." Vivian didn't even hesitate. She waved her bolt cutters like a flag. "This man is destroying our community," she shouted. "We have every right to protect our property values." Rodriguez's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'm giving you a lawful order. Drop the tool and step back." She didn't. Instead, she took one more step forward, right onto my property, and swung those cutters toward the nearest post. Click. The sound of handcuffs snapping shut was louder than her shouting. Two of her most enthusiastic volunteers were cuffed right beside her. And the best part? She'd called a local TV crew to film her community project. They got every second of it. Vivian screaming, the crowd scattering, the deputy calmly reading her rights. By evening, the footage was everywhere. Local news ran the headline, "HOA president arrested for trespassing during community cleanup gone wrong." The comments section? Pure chaos. People she'd bullied for years finally had their proof. And me? I sat on my porch, sipping coffee as the sun went down, watching tow trucks haul away her BMW. It was poetic. The same trucks I once owned shares in, now rolling out to collect the Queen's chariot. Vivian's empire had finally started to crumble. Vivian spent 72 hours in county jail before anyone could post her bond. Turns out, The community improvement fund she used for her defense was frozen, pending investigation for fraud. Her mugshot hit the evening news before she made it home. The same reporter she'd once coached for her PR story ran the segment. Headline: HOA President Under Fire for Fraud and Trespassing. The video of her arrest went viral. There she was, screaming about property values, while wearing matching shirts with her demolition crew. The internet did what it does best: memes, jokes, even a remix of her shouting over country music. But behind the laughter, something serious was happening. The county froze all her shell company accounts. 3 banks filed foreclosure notices. Her own board members were scrambling to distance themselves. And when Rex handed everything we'd found to the state attorney general, it lit a fuse that couldn't be put out. Environmental investigators discovered that her roadwork had diverted protected wetland runoff. Every fake permit she'd pushed through had violated federal law. The phrase, possible criminal conspiracy, started appearing in official reports. Meanwhile, the HOA's insurance company canceled their policy, citing active criminal investigations. That meant every board member was now personally liable for damages and lawsuits. The neighborhood shifted overnight. People who'd avoided me for months were suddenly showing up at my door, apologizing, offering to help. One woman, Janet, broke down crying. "She told us you were dangerous," she said. "We didn't know." For the first time in months, the tension started to fade, and it didn't take long for leadership to change. An emergency meeting was called, and by unanimous vote, Dr. Hernandez was elected interim HOA president. Marcus joined the new committee for community oversight. Janet handled transparency and finances, every dollar documented, every receipt public. They even passed a motion to officially recognize my driveway as private property, protected by law and deed. Vivian's kingdom had turned to dust. The FBI got involved soon after, pulling her financial records, property transfers, even her brother-in-law's construction contracts. When I saw the subpoena notices roll out, I couldn't help but smile. After all those months of her claiming she was protecting the community, it turned out the only thing she'd been protecting was her own greed. And now, justice was finally catching up. The courthouse felt different that morning. Packed, electric. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Neighbors, reporters, former board members, even people from nearby towns who'd followed the story online. You could feel it in the air. The end of something big. Vivian sat at the defense table, pale and stiff in a gray suit 2 sizes too small. Her lawyer looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. When the judge walked in, the room went silent. The case was State of Texas versus Vivian Ashcroft, charged with fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, and environmental violations. The prosecutors laid everything out, over 800 pieces of evidence. Marcus's footage, Rex's documents, every fake permit, every loan, every act of intimidation. It was devastating. Elena testified first, calm, composed, voice steady. She told the court about the harassment at her job, the threats, the vandalism, the fear, not a trace of anger, just quiet strength. Then came Dr. Hernandez, presenting medical reports showing how stress from Vivian's actions affected multiple families. Marcus followed, describing the security footage and the military-style intimidation tactics Vivian had used. When it was my turn, I walked to the stand with my binder in hand, the same one that had lived on my kitchen table for months. I told the story straight. No drama, no exaggeration. Just facts. The judge listened closely, never interrupting. When the defense tried to spin it, saying Vivian had acted in the community's best interest, she interrupted her own lawyer, shouting about ungrateful neighbors and people who refused to follow standards. The courtroom stared. The judge let her go on for almost a minute, then calmly said, "Ms. Ashcroft, that will be enough." Her outburst sealed her fate. When the verdict came, it was swift and merciless, guilty on all counts, 8 years in federal prison, full forfeiture of all properties purchased through fraud, restitution to victims, and federal supervision of all HOA funds going forward. The sound in the room was like a wave breaking. People clapping, crying, hugging. Vivian just sat there staring straight ahead, whispering, "This is all his fault," as marshals led her away. The headlines hit within hours. HOA president convicted in massive fraud and harassment case. News crews followed us outside. Elena squeezed my hand as I told the reporters, "We didn't fight to win money. We fought to get our lives back, and to make sure no one else goes through this." It was finally over. The noise, the fear, the endless letters, gone. But what came next was even better. The weeks after the trial felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. For the first time in forever, the air around our house smelled like fresh-cut grass instead of diesel. Birds had returned to the trees along our road. The same road Vivian once tried to steal. Now it was quiet again. Peaceful. Elena started planting new flowers where the paint stains used to be. Sophia laughed again. Really laughed, helping her mother while music played from the porch speakers. It hit me then. This was the life we were fighting for. The legal settlement came a few weeks later. The court ordered restitution, enough to cover damages, legal costs, and then some. But instead of splurging, we decided to do something meaningful. We donated a large chunk of it to create the Willow Creek Veterans Scholarship Fund, a program helping local military families with college tuition. Marcus helped run it. Dr. Hernandez sat on the board. Elena oversaw the education side. The same people Vivian tried to break had built something that would outlast her. Our neighborhood changed too. The new HOA, led by Dr. Hernandez, ran on transparency and fairness. Monthly budgets were posted online. Dues dropped by nearly 80%. For the first time, people actually showed up to meetings. Not to argue, but to volunteer. Vivian's old mansion didn't stay empty for long. It was converted into a community learning center, offering property rights workshops and neighborhood events. Her symbol of control had turned into a place that empowered others. 6 months later, the EPA restoration project was complete. The wetlands behind our property bloomed again, alive with color and songbirds that hadn't been seen here in decades. Sophia called it the sound of peace. And she wasn't wrong. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, Elena leaned against me on the porch. "You realize," she said softly, "we turned a nightmare into something beautiful." I smiled. "Yeah, I guess sometimes justice really does bloom." The camera of life had finally pulled back. No more shouting, no more fear. Just a gravel road winding through calm Texas countryside. That night, I uploaded my story. Not for revenge, but because somewhere out there, another family might be fighting their own HOA nightmare, feeling outnumbered, silenced, or scared. And I wanted them to know, you're not alone. Sometimes the quiet ones win. Sometimes the truth really does outlast the noise. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply living free. The weeks after the trial felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in years. For the first time in forever, the air around our house smelled like fresh-cut grass instead of diesel. Birds had returned to the trees along our road. The same road Vivian once tried to steal. Now it was quiet again. Peaceful. Elena started planting new flowers where the paint stains used to be. Sophia laughed again. Really laughed, helping her mother while music played from the porch speakers. It hit me then. This was the life we were fighting for. The legal settlement came a few weeks later. The court ordered restitution, enough to cover damages, legal costs, and then some. But instead of splurging, we decided to do something meaningful. We donated a large chunk of it to create the Willow Creek Veterans Scholarship Fund, a program helping local military families with college tuition. Marcus helped run it. Dr. Hernandez sat on the board. Elena oversaw the education side. The same people Vivian tried to break had built something that would outlast her. Our neighborhood changed too. The new HOA, led by Dr. Hernandez, ran on transparency and fairness. Monthly budgets were posted online. Dues dropped by nearly 80%. For the first time, people actually showed up to meetings, not to argue, but to volunteer. Vivian's old mansion didn't stay empty for long. It was converted into a community learning center, offering property rights workshops and neighborhood events. Her symbol of control had turned into a place that empowered others. 6 months later, the EPA restoration project was complete. The wetlands behind our property bloomed again, alive with color and songbirds that hadn't been seen here in decades. Sophia called it the sound of peace. And she wasn't wrong. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the hills, Elena leaned against me on the porch. "You realize," she said softly, "we turned a nightmare into something beautiful." I smiled. "Yeah, I guess sometimes justice really does bloom." The camera of life had finally pulled back. No more shouting, no more fear. Just a gravel road winding through calm Texas countryside. That night, I uploaded my story. Not for revenge, but because somewhere out there, another family might be fighting their own HOA nightmare, feeling outnumbered, silenced, or scared. And I wanted them to know, you're not alone. Sometimes the quiet ones win. Sometimes the truth really does outlast the noise. And sometimes, the best revenge is simply living free.